The man who looked his captors in the eye, got shot in the leg, and still ordered his army to attack with full force, became the father of the International Criminal Court, and left a legacy worth far more than money. Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson was born on December 16, 1926, in a tiny village called Calder Hall in Tobago. His father James was the headmaster of the local Methodist school, a strict man who demanded nothing but the best. Little Arthur grew up in Castara, a simple fishing village where life moved slowly and families worked hard just to survive. The family had 4 acres of land where they grew cocoa, coffee, and bananas. Young Arthur helped his dad harvest crops, milked the family cows, and did farm work before and after school. His mother was deeply religious, taking the children to church and teaching them right from wrong. It was a simple life, but it gave Arthur values that would shape everything he became. At school, Arthur wasn't the sports star. He tried cricket, football, and track, but never made any teams. What he lacked in sports, he made up for in brains. In 1938, when he was just 12 years old, he won the Bowles Scholarship. This meant he could go to Bishop's High School in Scarborough, Tobago's main town. At Bishop's, Arthur kept crushing it. In 1942, he won the House Scholarship, and in both 1944 and 1945, he earned the Higher School Certificate with distinction in Latin, 2 years in a row getting top marks in one of the hardest subjects. He competed for the Island Scholarship that would pay for university, but didn't win it. Most kids would have given up. Not Arthur Robinson. Without scholarship money, Arthur couldn't afford university. He got a teaching job at Bishop's High School for 6 months, didn't like it. Then he got a clerk job in the Department of Public Works, pushing papers around an office. That wasn't for him either. Arthur had bigger dreams. He enrolled as an external student at the University of London, studying law through correspondence courses while working in Tobago. Imagine studying advanced law books by yourself on a tiny island with no professors, no libraries, just you and the textbooks. In 1949, at age 23, he passed the Bachelor of Laws exam. That took incredible discipline. In 1951, Arthur left Tobago for London. He got admitted to the Inner Temple, one of the most prestigious law schools in England, and passed his bar exams in 1953, becoming a qualified lawyer. But he didn't stop there. That same year he got into St. John's College at Oxford University to study philosophy, politics, and economics. Oxford is one of the greatest universities in the world. At Oxford, Arthur discovered he had a gift for debating. He joined the Oxford Union Society and won prizes for his skills. He also met a fellow student named Robert Wutzel, who was writing about the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi war criminals were prosecuted after World War II. Arthur became fascinated with this idea of international justice, of having a court that could punish the worst crimes against humanity. This conversation would eventually change the world decades later. While at Oxford, Arthur joined the West Indian Students' Society and became its president. He met other Caribbean students who would become leaders, including Tom Adams, who became Prime Minister of Barbados. They talked about creating the West Indies Federation, a plan to unite all the British Caribbean islands into one country. When he finished at Oxford in 1954, he came back to Trinidad and Tobago in 1955 as a fully qualified lawyer with degrees from London and Oxford. Arthur joined a group called the Scarborough Political Circle, where people discussed politics. There, he met Eric Williams, who was giving incredible speeches about independence and Caribbean identity. Williams was forming a new political party called the People's National Movement, and Arthur became one of its founding members in 1956. He helped write the party's constitution. Williams made him deputy leader and party treasurer. Many thought Arthur would eventually take over from Williams. In 1956, Arthur ran for Parliament representing Tobago but lost to a very popular local politician. The loss hurt, but Arthur learned from it. In 1958, Arthur got elected to the Federal Parliament of the West Indies Federation representing Tobago. Then in 1961, Trinidad and Tobago was preparing for independence from Britain, and Arthur won the Tobago seat. When the country became independent on August 31, 1962, Prime Minister Eric Williams appointed Arthur as Minister of Finance. At 35 years old, Arthur Robinson became the first Minister of Finance of independent Trinidad and Tobago. He had to build the financial system of a brand new country. Arthur restructured the country's financial institutions and reformed monetary policy. From 1966 to 1970, he also served as Minister of External Affairs, representing Trinidad and Tobago internationally. But then something happened that changed everything. In 1970, there was a movement called the Black Power Revolution in Trinidad and Tobago. Young people were protesting against inequality and discrimination. The protests got intense, and Prime Minister Williams declared a state of emergency. Arthur Robinson disagreed with how Williams handled it. In April 1970, Arthur resigned from the government and left the People's National Movement. This took courage because Williams was incredibly powerful, and going against him could destroy your political career. Arthur felt it was the right thing to do, so he did it. After leaving the PNM, Arthur formed his own group that eventually became the Democratic Action Congress, or DAC. In the 1976 elections, the DAC won both Tobago seats. Arthur became the voice for Tobago, fighting for his island to have more control over its own affairs. He worked tirelessly for something called the Tobago House of Assembly, which would give Tobago its own local government instead of being completely controlled from Port of Spain in Trinidad. In 1980, his dream came true when the Tobago House of Assembly Act was passed, and Arthur became its first chairman. This was huge for Tobago. By the early 1980s, Arthur realized that to really make change in Trinidad and Tobago, he needed to build a broad coalition. The country was divided between people of African descent and people of Indian descent, with each group supporting different parties. Arthur joined forces with leaders from different communities. Together they formed the National Alliance for Reconstruction, known as the N.A.R. The idea was simple: bring everyone together regardless of race, religion, or background, and fix the country's problems together. The 1986 election was historic. Trinidad and Tobago's economy was in terrible shape. Oil prices had crashed in 1983, destroying the country's main source of income. Unemployment was rising, businesses were closing, people were struggling. The PNM had been in power for 30 years. On Election Day, December 15, 1986, the N.A.R. won a massive victory, taking 33 seats out of 36. It was a landslide. On December 17, 1986, at age 60, Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson became the third Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. The whole country celebrated. People felt hope again, but being Prime Minister was brutal. Arthur inherited an economic disaster. He had to make incredibly tough decisions. He negotiated loans from the International Monetary Fund, but the IMF demanded painful austerity measures. He had to cut government spending, devalue the currency, and reduce subsidies. These policies hurt ordinary people. Prices went up, unemployment reached 22%, and people got angry. The A.N.R. coalition started falling apart. Just months after becoming Prime Minister, Arthur fired several cabinet ministers. The unity that had won the election was breaking down. The party split along racial lines. Politics in Trinidad and Tobago has always had this racial tension, and Arthur couldn't overcome it. Despite the political chaos, Arthur achieved important things as Prime Minister. He worked on regional initiatives and pushed for Caribbean countries to work together better. But his biggest contribution to the world came in 1989. Arthur stood before the United Nations General Assembly and proposed something revolutionary: the creation of an international criminal court. He asked two legal experts, including Robert Watsell, the same guy he'd met at Oxford decades earlier, to help draft the proposal. Arthur's idea was that the world needed a permanent court to prosecute the worst crimes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes. For decades during the Cold War, this idea had been frozen. But as the Cold War ended, Arthur's voice broke through. His proposal laid the foundation for what would eventually become the International Criminal Court, which opened in 2002 at The Hague in the Netherlands. World leaders later called Arthur Robinson the godfather of the ICC. It's his greatest legacy to humanity. But then came July 27, 1990, a day that would define Arthur Robinson forever. Parliament was in session at the Red House in Port of Spain. Suddenly, armed gunmen from a group called the Jama'at al-Muslimin burst into the chamber. They were led by a man named Yassin Abu Bakr. The gunmen took Arthur, his cabinet ministers, and others hostage. At the same time, other members stormed the television station and bombed the police headquarters. Abu Bakr appeared on television telling the nation that the government had been arrested and he was in charge. For 6 days, the country lived a nightmare. Arthur and the other hostages were held at gunpoint. The Muslimin demanded Arthur resign as prime minister and that new elections be held in 60 days. At some point during those 6 terrifying days, the Muslimin told Arthur to order the army to stand down, to tell them to stop fighting. Arthur looked at his captors and shouted his famous words, "Attack with full force." The Muslimin shot him in the right leg. They beat him over the head with a rifle butt. But Arthur refused to back down. Even with a gun to his head, even bleeding from his wounds, he would not tell his country's military to surrender to terrorists. That moment showed the world who Arthur Robinson really was. Here was a man willing to die for democracy, for the principle that governments must never surrender to violence and intimidation. Outside, the streets erupted in chaos. People looted stores, buildings burned. The hostage situation lasted 6 days before the Muslimin finally surrendered on August 1, 1990. Arthur recovered from his injuries, though he never fully recovered his health. The shooting left him with leg problems, and he developed other health issues including high blood pressure, glaucoma, and prostate problems. In 1998, he needed heart surgery, but he kept serving. In the December 1991 elections, the N.A.R. lost badly to the PNM. Arthur's party only kept the 2 Tobago seats. His time as prime minister was over after just 5 years. Many people saw his premiership as a failure because of the economic pain and political divisions. But Arthur never quit politics. In the 1995 election, something incredible happened. The results were tied, 17 seats for the PNM and 17 for the United National Congress. Arthur's N.A.R. held the 2 Tobago seats, giving them the balance of power. Arthur decided to support the UNC, creating the first government in Trinidad and Tobago's history, led by an Indo-Trinidadian prime minister. This was historic. Then, in 1997, Arthur was elected president of Trinidad and Tobago. The presidency is mostly ceremonial, but Arthur wasn't elected unopposed. The opposition ran their own candidate, making it a real contest. As president from 1997 to 2003, Arthur sparked controversy. After the 2000 election produced another tie, 18 seats each for the PNM and UNC, Arthur had to decide who would be prime minister. Many people felt Arthur made choices based on personal reasons rather than constitutional principles. He also refused to appoint certain senators that the prime minister recommended. These decisions raised questions about whether Arthur was overstepping his role. Some admired this, others thought he went too far. Arthur's wife Patricia was by his side through all of this. Patricia Rawlins was brilliant in her own right. She was born in Port of Spain on March 34, 1930, and studied economics at Columbia University in New York City, earning her master's degree in 1957. She worked in public service and later became director of financial institutions at a national institute. When Arthur was held hostage in 1990, Patricia lived through her own nightmare, not knowing if her husband would survive. Patricia and Arthur had 2 children together, David, who became an aeronautical engineer, and Ann-Margaret, who became a mathematics teacher. They also had a granddaughter named Anushka. Patricia suffered from Alzheimer's disease and diabetes in her later years and died in her sleep on September 10, 2009, at age 79. Arthur was devastated by her death. Now let's talk about Arthur's wealth, because the title mentions a $5 million legacy. Here's the truth. There's no reliable documentation of Arthur Robinson having a $5 million fortune. He spent his entire life in public service. He was a lawyer, a minister, a prime minister, a president, but these aren't positions that create massive wealth in Trinidad and Tobago. His legacy wasn't measured in money. It was measured in institutions he helped build: the Tobago House of Assembly he fought for, the International Criminal Court he proposed, the courage he showed during the coup attempt, and the principles he stood by even at gunpoint. The real treasure Arthur Robinson left was his example of integrity, courage, and dedication to justice. Arthur Robinson retired as president on March 17, 2003, at age 77. But retirement didn't mean disappearing. He wrote his autobiography called In the Midst of It, published in 2012. He also wrote The Mechanics of Independence, about how Trinidad and Tobago gained and managed its independence. He gave lectures, attended ceremonies, and remained a respected elder statesman. The International Criminal Court honored him as their godfather. Tobago gave him their highest award, the Tobago Medal of Honor, in November 2011. In May 2011, the airport in Tobago was renamed the A.N.R. Robinson International Airport. Every time someone flies to Tobago, they see his name. Arthur received numerous international honors. The Trinity Cross, Trinidad and Tobago's highest award, was given to him in 1997. In 1991, the Uni of Ile-Ife in Nigeria made him a chief. Venezuela gave him their highest award. He was made Freeman of Cities in California. The Order of the Caribbean Community was conferred on him in 1998. He received honorary degrees and recognition from organizations worldwide. But the award that probably meant the most was having Tobago's airport named after him, because Tobago was always his first love. Arthur's final years were marked by declining health. The bullet wound from 1990 never fully healed. He had a stroke, suffered from glaucoma, developed prostate complications, and experienced hearing and vision problems. By 2009, after Patricia's death, he had difficulty walking. On April 9, 2014, Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson died at St. Frul, Clare Medical Center in Port of Spain. He was 87 years old. The news shook Trinidad and Tobago and the entire Caribbean. Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bissessar said he was one of the nation's outstanding sons. Tributes poured in from around the world. The International Criminal Court hailed him as their godfather. Caribbean leaders spoke of his vision. Even political opponents acknowledged his contributions. Trinidad and Tobago held a 5-day state funeral for Arthur Robinson. His body was flown to Tobago and lay in state so people could pay their respects. Parliament held special sessions where members from all parties gave tributes. He was buried in the Scarborough Methodist Cemetery in Tobago, back home where his journey began. Years later, a former hostage from the 1990 coup visited Arthur's grave and was shocked to find it overgrown with grass and weeds, neglected and forgotten. It sparked a call for a museum honoring Arthur Robinson because a man of his stature deserved better. Arthur Robinson's legacy is complicated. Some remember him as a hero who stood up to armed terrorists and never backed down. They remember him as the father of the ICC, who gave the world a tool to fight genocide and war crimes. They remember him as the man who fought for Tobago's autonomy and brought different racial groups together. They see him as a man of principle, who resigned from Eric Williams's government when he disagreed, even though it cost him politically. Others remember the painful austerity of his time as prime minister, the economic hardship, the racial divisions that destroyed the N.A.R. coalition, the controversial decisions he made as president. The truth is, Arthur Robinson was human. He made mistakes. His economic policies caused real suffering even though they may have been necessary. His political alliances fell apart. His presidency was controversial, but through it all, he never sold out his principles for political gain. When terrorists held a gun to his head and ordered him to surrender his government, he refused. That moment alone defines his character. He believed in democracy, in the rule of law, in justice, in standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. From a fishing village in Tobago to Oxford University, from finance minister to prime minister to president, from a hostage with a bullet in his leg to the godfather of the International Criminal Court, Arthur Robinson lived a life of service and sacrifice. His legacy to Tobago is the House of Assembly that gives the island self-governance. His legacy to Trinidad and Tobago is showing that political courage matters more than political survival. His legacy to the Caribbean is his vision of regional unity. His legacy to the world is the International Criminal Court that prosecutes humanity's worst crimes. His legacy to all of us is the example that when evil stares you down and demands you compromise your principles, you can look back and say attack with full force, because some things are worth dying for. If understanding real leadership, true courage, and lasting impact matters to you, hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like, and comment below telling us about a leader from your country who sacrificed everything for what they believed in. Because Arthur Robinson's story proves that the greatest fortunes aren't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the principles you die defending.